Okay, so in this presentation we're going to talk about the benefits of ethanol and kind of how it compares to other fuels or other propulsion systems for vehicles such as diesel fuel, gasoline, compressed natural gas, liquid natural gas, electric vehicles, fuel cell vehicles, hybrid technology, and then we'll kind of see what's going on in the world on how ethanol production is changing, how it's being made better, and I hope this kind of gives everybody an idea of what we could use ethanol for and how it could be a great asset to the industry. So what can ethanol do for us? First of all, it could potentially increase fuel economy. And I say with the correct supportive technology because if we built engines with compression ratios high enough to utilize ethanol to the fullest of its ability, then we would definitely be able um, to use that efficiency to create better economy using ethanol as a fuel. Um, it will end up decreasing emissions slightly. It may increase some more with a higher fuel ratio such as NOx, but it should decrease emissions overall. You'll see over and over again in this presentation that I comment that ethanol is a renewable resource. I find this very important because if we can grow our own fuel from energy crops, I think it definitely has a strong impact on not only the environment, but it will have an impact on prices worldwide of what we have for these fuels. Uh, it also can be used to revitalize unfertile land, such as places where there's been a lot of chemical waste dumped onto the land. The energy crops don't need the same nutrients, so they've been known to actually pull that stuff out of the ground and make it more fertile for regular growing. We can eventually reduce the cost of fuel. So quick comparisons here to each of the different fuels. Comparison to gasoline. Um, Ethanol has a higher octane rating without the necessity for a bunch of additional additives, which allows for the higher compression ratio I was just talking about, um, better performance, and then a potential higher fuel economy. Um, we can use smaller engines to receive the same kind of power. There's a study going on at MIT right now where they actually created an ethanol-based internal combustion engine that uses direct injection and valve timing and everything like that, and a turbocharger, and they're going to stick that in a GMC Sierra in place of the diesel, hoping to achieve the same amount of power, have the vehicle act the same, but use a V6 instead of that V8. Um, like I said, we also do a reduction in emissions. The only downside is right now gasoline is cheaper, although I think that'll change. Comparison to diesel, uh, it has about the same emission output right now to a clean diesel. They have made ethanol-based compression ignition engines. There's a company in Sweden called Scania that actually makes a lot of engines for transportation vehicles that use ethanol um, as their main fuel source. It just requires certain additives, and the compression ratio of that engine needs to be about 28 to 1. So um, ethanol does require the special materials within the engine so that you can, keep up with the lubrication and everything. It, like I said, would also require a certain amount of additives, and so its comparison to diesel is not as it's not as favorable as a matchup versus what ethanol can have over gasoline. As far as compressed natural gas and propane goes, really the downside of those two is that they require the special systems within the car to be able to store the fuels and to be able to use the fuels. And so far, their range is really just not great. Propane is doing a lot better than CNG is. It's become a lot more effective and efficient for fleet vehicles because of the cost that is associated with buying propane. It's typically cheaper. And it definitely is a reduction in emissions as well. Um, but overall, ethanol can store more energy in less space, and once again, it's a renewable energy, which is something that CNG and propane are not. Just a quick recap, I believe that ethanol could be a better fuel than gasoline just because of its potential. It is definitely more viable for travel than CNG and propane just due to range and the amount of equipment. And I think that diesel fuel does win over ethanol right now when used in the compression ignition engines, just because the infrastructure is not there. That technology, even though it's being implemented and used, I just don't think is as good as it is for some of the other applications. Um, its comparison to liquid natural gas, really the only thing to say about liquid natural gas is because of the extensive equipment you need within the vehicle to not only keep it cold enough to keep it in liquid form, but it also the infrastructure you need at stations to be able to fill it, the proper tools you need to handle it, special gloves and such because of the amount of cold. It just really is not a viable option. I know it was used and probably still is used some today, but it really is, when compared to ethanol, not the best alternative. Marine equipment is using it a lot more, you know, and for tankers and things like that that are traveling a long ways and have the capacity to be able to store a huge tank. Um, Liquid natural gas is still being an option, and a lot of research is being done on that. But I just don't think for automotive transportation that LNG is a very good alternative to ethanol or anything we have now. Um, Hybrid vehicles, I don't think ethanol should replace them, but I think if we use it instead of gasoline, we can, acquire a cleaner burning fuel. The fuel can be made more efficient. Batteries, on the most part for hybrid and electric vehicles still have a negative impact on the environment until the technology gets better, and maybe they don't need to be replaced as often, or maybe they're just less harmful. But once again, ethanol is a renewable energy, so if we can use a renewable energy with that hybrid power, I think it'll be an upgrade. Electric vehicles, pretty much just the same as with CNG and propane. The range just is not there. Also, electricity is not the cleanest thing to produce. I know neither is ethanol, but at the same time, I think ethanol, the way that it's going, will be a lot cleaner to produce. And I think electric vehicles will be there someday, but just the fact that ethanol still, once again, is a renewable resource, and the amount of range that it can get over it, 300, 400 miles to the gallon, or miles to the tank versus, the 100-mile range that electric vehicles have, still just is better. Fuel cell vehicles, same idea. Ethanol has a larger range. Um, it's cheaper and easier to produce. It doesn't require special storage. It's still a renewable energy source. Ethanol right now is more efficient. And for fuel cell vehicles, there's just so much more equipment that needs to be added on that it just isn't a viable option. So just to recap one more time, I think ethanol would pretty much be better than everything else I just mentioned, the liquid natural gas, electric vehicles, fuel cells, and it definitely can make hybrids better. Once again, ethanol is a renewable energy source, and I think if we get on board and shove a bunch of our research money that we're spending on fuel cells and electric vehicles into ethanol just for a short period of time, like a year or two, I think we could definitely bounce into a good stretch. A little bit about ethanol production. I don't want to waste too much of your time, but production isn't entirely green yet. It still takes a lot of energy to be able to create this. Ethanol has become more worth it recently, where it costs less energy to make it than it actually gives out. And with the introduction of cellulosic ethanol production, new bacteria like Xemomonas mobilis, production costs are going way down, and it's becoming, we don't have to use food sources to be able to do it. So, and that is the end of my presentation.